welcome back. The second part of tonight's program. We've cleverly titled Thriving in Philly and a Global Economy, a panel discussion featuring women business leaders. I want to thank AJ Raju, our sponsor, both for this discussion and for the AJ Raju Millennial Membership Program series, of which this is a part, which is the Council's membership category and program series for young professionals in their 20s and 30s. We have an accomplished and, I think, inspiring group of women on tonight's panel from a variety of sectors, including finance, law, education, consulting, and nonprofit work. I'm going to invite Peggy Limekiller, who is a vice chairman of the World Affairs Council and the chief operating officer and EVP at First Trust Bank, to come to the podium, introduce our speakers, and moderate this discussion. So thank you, Peggy.
Thanks. Thank you. Good evening. Well, Arianna Huffington is a hard act to follow, I will tell you that much. So between the fact that you've had, if you're lucky, some heavy hors d'oeuvres, and already about an hour's worth of talking, on behalf of the panel, can I just say we're really glad you're hanging out to talk with us a little bit, because we did some prep in advance, and we have a lot of really interesting things to talk about. So on behalf of First Trust Bank, I'm really pleased to be here, to be involved with the World Affairs Council, to be involved with our great programs like the Global Leadership Initiative for Young Professionals, the Millennial Membership piece, which has been added in this last year. And I think that we're going to spend a little bit of time for you to get to know the panel and then dive right in on some questions and hopefully spark some ideas in your heads. Then we're going to spend about the last 15 or 20 minutes for your questions. And I can tell you on behalf of the panel, please don't be shy. It was hard on our conference call. We had a preparation conference call, and then we spent some time together in the cocktail hour. We have a lot to say. So please, challenge us and give us some of your thoughts, and let's bounce some of those together. One of the things we decided to do when we were deciding how to lay out the panel tonight is not for me to read you the bios of these amazingly accomplished panel members and women, but rather to ask them each take a couple of minutes and introduce themselves to you. And I've asked them to do it in a very specific way, which is to just take a couple of minutes, tell you who they are, what they do, and where they work, but then to start by sort of ending their introduction by telling you one piece of advice that they would have given themselves right when they were starting out. So that's how we're going to introduce the panel, and I'm going to start here with my immediate left, Mazda Miles. Mazda.
Hi, good evening. Again, I'm Mazda Miles, and I am the founder, CEO of Perfection Events. We're an events management firm here based in Philadelphia that I started about 5 years ago, so glad to be over that 5-year hump, finally. And I'm also the president-elect of the Greater Philadelphia chapter of the National Association of Women Business Owners. For myself, it's quite a glamorous kind of thing, doing events. Everyone kind of looks at it and says, it's got to be a ton of fun. And while it is true that I have the pleasure of traveling and having a staff member or myself probably on a different continent every other month producing events and meetings, I had to step back and think about, what I would say to myself, my younger self. And that is very simply that success is not going to be a straight line, and that you don't necessarily need to know all of the steps. You just need to know what the next step is. When I was kind of starting out, I had in my mind, first of all, I went to school originally as a vocal performance major, minoring in English, okay? And through my career, I've done everything from administration to HR to technical to training and ended here. And I am extremely excited about what I do, and I'm passionate about it. So again, success may not be a straight line. You may not know the exact path. Know what the next step is, and allow yourself and the greatness that is you to direct where you end up.
Awesome. Thanks, Mazda. Next, we have Sarita Moore.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarita Moore, and I'm a partner at Weber Gallagher, which is a law firm here in Center City. I've been practicing for about 10 years, and my practice ranges from general litigation, real estate, transactional work, complex commercial litigation, and also entertainment. I have a entertainment practice. I represent some producers and actors out in LA, and I have this little small entertainment practice. And the one thing that I would tell myself, my former self, when I started out was relationships are important, and people remember how you make them feel. And I think that's very important because, you know, when you're in corporate America, you tend to look or be focused on a goal or an end result, and you never look at the people that help you get there. And there's always a lot of people that help you on the way, and you need to remember that. And you need to make them feel good. And I think when you make people feel good, people, you know, motivate you, and they also do well for you. So I think it's really important, as you know, as you young millennials go out into corporate America and become management and executives, that you remember that in order to make a workforce prosperous, you need to make sure that you treat your workforce well.
Thanks, Sarita. Next up, we have Dr. Christine, Dr. Christine Marty Ochola.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it's almost the end of the day. Technically, per Ariana, maybe it is the end of the day. We should all be going to bed soon, right? I'm the current president of the Sub-Saharan Africa Chamber of Commerce, which is a chamber that supports bilateral trade relationships between U.S. companies and African companies. And that's an organization that I co-founded with 3 other women about 7 years ago. I also own a consulting company that primarily focuses on improving health and the environment, specifically public health and various environmental remediation work. I'm originally from Kenya, and so in East Africa, so most of my work is in East Africa. As I thought about, you know, what I would tell my younger self, my brain started racing, and I couldn't decide what to tell my younger self. And I remembered being a 3rd grader and being in art class and not necessarily coloring inside the lines. So I thought that I needed to tell myself that it's okay not to fit in a box, and it's okay not to be the kid who can color within the lines, because I would say, Christine, you're a generalist, even though you did not know what that meant when you were a little person. And I thought that because I am trained as a chemist, a pharmaceutical chemist is my background. I've also been trained as a food science and technologist because I love the idea of production of food in large quantities. I love business. I love talking to people. I love technology. I love consulting. I love lots of things, you know, and so I said, hey, you know, I wish I'd known I was a generalist when I was trying to fit in the box. And it's okay not to be in the box. It's okay to chase your passions and to build your business or to work in an environment that matches what your passions are, and that you might find your passions change, and it's okay to flow with that change and with that positively impact the environment in which you are.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we have Nyla Konkorat.
Hi, I'm Nyla Konkorat. I'm a managing partner at Carlani Capital. We invest in rapidly growing technology companies that have demonstrated that they're changing the world in material ways. We recently moved our headquarters to Philadelphia, so very excited to be here and part of the thriving technology scene in Philadelphia. In terms of what I would tell my young me, so I always do my homework, and you guys are all like, yeah, duh, I'm sitting in a room of overachievers, you do that. And I bring that up because it's necessary but not sufficient. I went straight from undergrad to investment banking on Wall Street, and I remember thinking, everybody is so tough, everybody knows everything. I'm not going to let my guard down. I'm not going to be vulnerable, and so I stopped asking questions. And I didn't realize then, and I realize now, that asking those questions was a really critical step for me in the process of learning and discovery, and that not doing that actually stunted that process and took a lot of the joy out of it. So I guess what I would tell my former self is, have fun, and you did your homework. You deserve to be here, so have the courage to ask the question.
Thank you, Nyla. And last but certainly not least, we have Vana Zervanos, who I would say I was incredibly impressed at over here speaking Greek with Ariana Huffington at one point. So, Vana.
I said 3 words to her, but thank you. I'm an associate dean at the Hobbs School of Business. I've been at St. Joe's for 15 years. I started there in the disabilities office. I have a background in psychology, both undergraduate and graduate. While working with students, I was feeling restless and wanted a change, and I didn't know what exactly that meant, so I decided to do my MBA part-time. It was learning a second language. I had no clue where it would lead me. All I knew was that I wanted to work in the business school, and that's all I knew. And grateful that I had the opportunity to land a job. Some things that I'm responsible for include our adult degree completion program, our veteran services program, among other things. Some exciting things that have nothing to do with my job have to do with my work with students. I oversee a leadership program, a undergraduate program for young women, and a very cool and frustrating effort was to establish our first women's center at St. Joe's. And that was a very exciting time and frustrating. What I would tell my younger self, and I'm still telling it to me, is loosen up. And there's no prescribed way of being anyone. When I first started at the Hobbs School, I noticed that everyone spoke so fast. Development people spoke fast, the business people spoke fast, and I'm, oh my God, I need to speed it up, but I'm from Lancaster and we speak really slowly. And yeah, still figuring out how I ought to be. So now I'm sort of giving that up and just being me, and it seems to be working out better, I think. I hope.
Awesome. That's awesome, thank you. Well, so I would say that's a pretty good kickoff, right? So you're here we're about 10 minutes in, and I think you heard a pretty nice prescription. If you take those 5 together, we heard the path to success is not a straight line. Relationships matter. It's okay to color outside the lines. Don't stop asking questions, and loosen up, because there's no one way that works for everybody. So that, I think you got your money's worth already, guys, I have to say, from this panel, so. All right, but we'll keep going because we have a little bit more time. So let's actually start with, and I want to share something in terms of the panel prep that I think it's important for you all to know as you hear where some of our questions will go. And that is that when we came together, we looked at the way we were sort of communicated about on the website, which said a panel of young women business leaders who will talk about sort of thriving in Philadelphia and globally as a woman leader. And we talked quite a lot as we were preparing to say, do we want to just talk about gender-related things or female things? Or do we want to think about how to broaden this discussion out? And I think there was a lot, first of all, there were perspectives that literally went from one end to the other, which is what always makes the conversation fun and what brings the strength to our companies when we've got those kinds of diverse perspectives. But I also think that there was some acknowledgement that for millennials, and I went and sort of tested this with some millennials in my own life, including my daughter, there was some, feeling on this panel that while those things are still valid and important for us to acknowledge and talk about tools to overcome, if we're going to continue to shift the conversation together, then we need to keep working on shifting the conversation together and having it be more about leadership and broad pieces and figuring out where we mix in when it really is different from a gender perspective. So that's where you're going to hear where some of our questions go, is to try to find that balance for you all. And so what I'm going to actually start with is I'm going to start with a gender question, because we do have all women, and I do think there's some value in this piece, and that is we've got diverse industries, diverse backgrounds, different places from where all of our panelists started. The question for the panelists is, when you were coming into your specific industry, what were the barriers for women in your line of work? And do you think they still exist, or have they changed? So if there were young women professionals coming into your field, what advice would you give them? And feel free to broaden that into young professionals coming into your field if you think it's more valid from your perspective. And I think maybe we'll start in the middle, Christine, with you, if you're okay.
Okay. The industry I'm going to choose is a Chamber of Commerce, because I found that one to be the trickiest of all, from a gender perspective and maybe also from an age perspective. Typically, when we look at chambers of commerce, and again, this is a generalization, it's typically run by a man, usually a man who's at least 50 years old and above. If we're in this country, it's usually a man who's Caucasian, and who has either run a very flourishing business or has been in corporate and so on. So entering the world of trade and investment as a woman, let me say a black woman, let me say an African black woman, who was described as a chemist, was a little bit tricky. And the other women who we started this organization with was somewhat cut out of the same cloth as I was. And we went to an embassy and spoke to the ambassador and said, hey, you know, there's a huge gap in doing trade and investment with Africa. There's a huge buying potential there. And we really think that there's an opportunity to support US businesses that are looking to enter this market. And he said, oh, so is this a women's group? And we're like, no. We said Chamber of Commerce. I said, no, it's got to be a women's group. And we're like, no, it's not a women's group. And he said, so where are the men then? And I said, do we need to have men as part of this? And he says, I'm going to give you a list of things to do in order to be able to get this thing off the ground. So he gave us a laundry list of things to do, and going back to planning. So I said, okay. And on the list, he wanted to see men as part of the advisory group and a whole bunch of stuff. So we went back and we, so I'm originally Kenyan. I said that. Anybody who knows Kenyan knows that they love tea. So we went and made lots of tea, and we sat down around the table and said, do we really have to do it this way? And we wanted to give up, because when we then went back and looked at the profile of chambers, we did not fit that mold. But we knew that there was an opportunity, and we needed to stick with it. So one of the co-founders, her husband, was like, you know what, guys, I'll be your token guy. How about that? We're like, thank you. So we got our token guy, right? And it made a difference. And what I would say is that it's important to definitely do your homework, see what the opportunity is in whatever field it is, and not to necessarily allow the environment to dissuade you from entering the field that you see an opportunity in. Whether you're male or female or black, white, whatever it is, Asian, we don't necessarily have to look at a field as being gender specific or race specific or even necessarily training specific, because we can learn a lot along the way. And I would say that really in entering the world of investment and trade and finance, it's typically been a very male-centric field, but there's huge opportunities for women because we bring a different perspective, I think, to these types of transactions. So.
Thanks, Christine. Nala, do you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing to kind of think about these gender-specific differences, and is it more difficult for women to enter this particular profession? Talking about finance, yes, it is still kind of a male-dominated industry, but I think Peggy, actually, you said something interesting earlier to me today, which is that, well, why aren't we kind of defined on our, unless we're told that we can't do something, then we don't even realize. So does the fact that we know that it's a more male-dominant industry dissuade more women from even going in that direction? And I think we're seeing some change, but I think part of it is the messaging that we give our kids and our peers and our students, and it's something that we should definitely be aware of.
Yes, Natalie. Do we want to pick up? Sarita, do you want to?
Well, the legal industry, I think, has a lot of barriers. I mean, I think even in 2015, there is, I think the statistic is it's less than 10% of African American attorneys in the city of Philadelphia. Out of, and then out of that, there's even a smaller percentage that are partners. And not even talking about gender issues, I think it's very difficult, especially for female attorneys to, if they decide to have children, and to kind of keep up with everything and keep the work-life balance when you become a partner at a law firm. And I think that, every day, women attorneys who become partners, and African Americans who become partners, and every other minority to become partners defy these barriers. And I think as time progresses, we will see more change in that area. But a lot of it has to do with economic adversities, not even before you get to law school. I mean, I think a lot of urban, when you look at schools in urban areas compared to schools in a lot of suburban areas, there's a big disparity. So when a child goes to college, there's still that gap becomes wider, because now they're in a college setting and they might not have had all the information or knowledge or education that maybe their counterpart has. And then once they become to law school, I think it's more difficult, because in law school they kind of take everybody, the cream of the crop. And if when you're the cream of the crop, you have these expectations that everybody will be on an even level, but it's not. So I think, as time progresses, as we get more equality education, and people at the top levels of their profession, minorities, everyone all alike, start realizing that we actually have to make choices when hiring people. A lot of people say, oh, I'm not, I don't like to look at race, I hire people evenly. I think that in this society, if there's 3 candidate positions out there, and you're a partner at a law firm, and there's only 2 other minorities at your law firm, you have to make a decision that says, okay, I'm gonna make this position, I'm gonna find the best available minority candidate for that position. And I think people aren't doing that. I think they're saying, oh, I'm gonna pick the best person, but people tend to pick or wanna work with people they have a lot in common with. That's just normal. I mean, I want to work with somebody that I like, or I have a lot in common with. And sometimes that person who is the minority, you might not have anything in common with, but they could be a good candidate. And I think you need to put that in perspective as you go out in the workforce and you become management level, or you become a level where you can make decisions like that, to really kind of make it a point that in order to affect change, you have to be a part of it, so.
Thanks, Sarita. Vana, maybe you actually have two perspectives, I think, on this question, and Sarita is sort of ending on the opportunity of education and where that starts to maybe matter more. You've got a perspective from a career within higher education, as well as a perspective around some of what you're seeing with students and mix of classes, if you would maybe speak to the question in those contexts.
I think in higher ed, things are fairly equitable. At St. Joe's, we are on the higher level. I know that there has been great effort in making sure that there's pay equity, that things like rank and tenure are looked at, and so I know that is something that the university is committed to doing right and well. However, at the business school, it is dominated by men in certain quant areas, in accounting, finance, and decision systems, and we are seeing a decline in our female enrollment in some of those areas. Why that is, there are obvious theories, so it's something that we take seriously, the dean takes seriously, and whether it's student groups similar to what I run, or programming, or things like the Women's Center, we are concentrating and looking at how our female students can expand their interests and explore what it is that might be prohibiting them from doing specific kinds of majors where we need them the most.
Thanks, Vana. Mazda, did you want to weigh in here on this?
In my field, I think that in the forefront, you see a ton of women. But on the flip side of that, there's a very technical aspect of my field around production and all of that, and that's specifically the area that I see that young females that are interested feel that they have barriers. I may not be, welcomed into being a lighting director. I may not be welcomed into being a show manager, a producer. So those are the specific areas that I do see the diversity issue come into play, and I have always been a proponent of just continuing to encourage those to make a difference and continue in those fields. So, it's not as sticky as some of the other areas in my field, but all I can say is, as everyone else has so adequately said, continue on and don't be intimidated by what seems to be the lack of opportunity, because when you have the platform, be great at what you do, right? Let your brand speak for you, because even in my particular situation, very often I am entering organizations as a business owner and needing to speak to senior leaders, and very often that is a man. But when your brand speaks for who you are, that becomes somewhat of a non-issue.
Thank you. I'm going to shift topics a little bit here and connect back into what we just heard from Ariana Huffington in terms of the idea of the third metric of defining success. So this idea that it's not just money or power, that there's this other piece to sort of feed the soul. And again, as we were sort of prepping for the panel, we talked a little bit about, what questions folks wanted to respond to or not respond to. And one of the things that was very interesting was we talked about a question where we would maybe share some of our own ways that we sort of find to feed the soul, or to do those, mindfulness pieces that kind of help keep the balance. And a couple folks on the panel said, yeah, don't ask me that one, because I'm not really good at it, and I'm not sure I have any advice to offer. And it's interesting because, and I would offer just this sort of quick personal story on that, which I didn't really put into context in my own head until listening to Ariana Huffington tonight, and that is that idea of just the very idea of being busy is I'm so busy feels like a success definition. And what I realized in listening to her tonight is I have a very dear friend who I've known since elementary school. And she said to me about a year ago, one of the things I've always admired about you is that you're really good at knowing how to take care of yourself so that you have enough left for everybody else. And it might be in really small things, but you always light the candle, or you always have flowers on the table, or you always do the things that I know feed your soul. And she was intending to be fully complimentary. But my immediate reaction was, well, I'm not that good to myself. Like it was kind of like I didn't want to own it because it was almost like it wasn't okay, to sort of be like that. And so I share that because that context came a little clearer to me in listening to Arianna Huffington. But I'm going to go into the question for those of you who'd like to answer it or offer something, sort of what are the things that you do to sort of feed your soul, get to that third metric piece, make sure the stool doesn't topple over. And Christine, would you mind starting?
Sure, I can start. I do a few things. I go to church, and I find that when I do, my phone has to be off during that period of time. And I have this thing where my phone goes off on Friday evenings, and I can then focus on just being, on meditating, on spending time with self and family without the distraction. And I made it very intentional of telling my friends and so on that, guys, honestly, don't try to call me on Friday night or Saturday because I'll be unavailable. If it's really, 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 really important, then maybe call my husband, who doesn't turn off his phone if you absolutely have to find me. But 9 times out of 10, I'm unavailable. And so that gives me a chance to unplug because my work is both here and in Africa, so I'm plugged in most of the time. So I needed time to be away from technology and phones and speaking to people. So I do that. On Wednesdays, I was telling Mazda and Sarita that I have my me day on Wednesdays, smack in the middle of the week, where once again I unplug. And I don't work inside an office on Wednesdays, I work in a park. So I can choose Valley Forge Park, I can go down to the park in Philadelphia, I can even work on the street, Walnut Street. I'll just park my car there. And I love Wawa hot chocolate. So I'll stop and get Wawa hot chocolate. And I love cookies also, so I'll get some cookies and music. And so if I have a few meetings during the day on Wednesdays, I try not to have meetings on Wednesday, but if I do, I'll take them. But I work outside. And when people call, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm enjoying some vitamin D. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm inside my car, or I'm walking, or I'm taking pictures. I love photography, so I'll go by the river and try to take a picture of a leaf or something, or a fish, or, the guys boating. And that allows me to reconnect with nature and to just be observant of what's going on. But most importantly, it enables me to unplug from what's going on in my business so that I can feel again. And then on Thursdays, one of my boys loves to dance, so I go for his dance class, and I just observe all these young people dancing and having a great time. And I have to tell my brain to stop thinking about work, and that's sometimes tricky. So, whether it's Wednesdays, whether it's Friday into Saturdays, or Thursday, during those moments, I say, I'm going to set aside this for me, or for my family, or for whatever. I unplug the other things. On a daily basis, I cook, love to cook. So I make dinners every day. I cook, except for today, of course, because I was here. And I just love cooking, thinking about what I'm cooking, and then eating with the family. And then after everybody goes to bed, I take another hour and a half and finish the work that I could have finished while I was cooking. And then I go to bed. But that's a little bit about how I work. But I intentionally every day try to do something for me, and I make everybody around me aware that it's Christine time, so I'm sorry, can't plug in right now. I'll talk to you later. So, I don't know. Who else
Thanks,
wanted
Christine.
to?
Did anybody else want to weigh in on this one?
I will. I have deemed this personal thing, and I'm sure someone else has done it, but I use the hashtag no work weekend. And I do that for myself, and it's my symbol to everyone that's even on social media with me and all that stuff, that I'm out here enjoying myself. And so, because I travel a lot, of course, I have, points at hotels, and sometimes I just get in the car and I drive, and I unplug from everything. My kids are out of the house, and they're grown, so I can do that right now. I understand everyone cannot. And I, just go sit. I could just be in a hotel somewhere, just doing whatever, just enjoying myself for that time. And then also, I sew, and it's not something that I've done since I was really young. It's something that I picked up 8 years ago-ish. I'm not great, but I'm okay, and I have a little area in my house, and I'm good enough to make a summer dress, right? And I have a little area in my house that I go to, and it's mindless, right? I'm not thinking about work, and I'm just, like I said, because I'm not great, it's like I don't have these expectations on myself about making this garment so perfect, and I, challenge myself, little things like, ooh, today we'll do the big buttons or whatever, but it's something that's not as big as make sure you reconcile this $2.3 million event budget, right? It's something else that I can just enjoy during my time, and and then I volunteer also. I also go to church. That's where a lot of my volunteering happens, as well as in the community. And when I'm big with youth. That's, kind of my place. And when I'm with the youth, they don't allow me to think about anything else. They're like, are you checking an email? We're right here. We're right here. So that's, my time.
And understand that the reason that the panel wanted to address this question is not to make anybody who's out there or anybody who's on this stage feel like, oh, I haven't figured this out yet, but rather to sort of draw out the idea that it's okay to be thinking about how do you sort of feed that third metric or think about what it might look like for you. And it doesn't need to be something really big. So it's so cool that Mazda sews, but I light a candle. That's a whole lot more approachable in terms of the amount of time that it takes, but it brings me a similar kind of feeling of being able to just sort of unplug and unwind. So, I think that's the point there. I have one more sort of question. We're going to, in about 5 minutes, go to some questions, I hope, from you all. I have one more I want to put out there for the panel, and that is, Sarita said in her one piece of advice to her younger self, relationships matter. And one of the things that we talked about, sort of on the call and in the cocktail hour, was the idea of networking and the importance of networking, which isn't easy at any age. And frankly, from my perspective, as best as I can tell, never gets easier. It's never easy to walk into a room of people that you don't know and start connecting and force yourself to smile, but it's important. And the more you do it, it's like any muscle, the more you do it, the easier it gets, because you sort of force yourself into the behavior. But what we talked about is we know we're busy and hard to connect to. And so we sit on a panel and we say, it's really important to make connections and connect to us. And what we thought you might want to hear is, what could you do? What specific things could you do as a younger professional to make yourself stand out if you're trying to connect to Mazda or Nyla or Sarita or Vanna or Christine? What are the things that you could do that would make them want to follow up with you and reach out and establish a little bit of a better connection to move forward? So I'm going to start right down the line here, so those of you at the end can be thinking about your answers. But Mazda, I'll ask you to go first.
On the call, we talked about this, and I was saying how I get a lot of emails, resumes. I want to connect with you. I'm interested in your field. And one of the things that I said that really makes folks stand out is remind me of how I know you, right? So that I can remember how we connected. Be specific about what you want. Right? I saw you at such and such, or I found your website in this place, and I'm interested in your field. I would like to do X. Be very specific, not just, hi, I think you're cool. I want to meet with you. I think you're all about that. Third, and these may seem very tactical. I'm sure we'll have even more, inspirational advice as we get in line. Attach your resume I get that a lot. I get people that are like, I want to connect with you. I would like, if you have any positions. I'm like, you didn't attach your resume. I can't even look if I want to. The new LinkedIn profile thing where you create your LinkedIn profile and it's almost like your resume, that's cool. I click a link, I can see it. That's also very great as well. And so that's the final, be on LinkedIn. And it's fine to follow up. You know, it's fine to follow up. People are busy. It's fine to give, for me, it's fine to give me a phone call. A lot of people do catch me on the phone. And I'm glad to talk about it. And don't be offended if someone doesn't get right back to you. It's oftentimes emails go into spam, people are, traveling, all that good stuff. Know that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. Persistence does pay off. I actually have some pretty high-level folks in the city and in organizations that I have one particular story. I won't tell who they are and what it was, but it was up there. And she finally said, Mazda, your persistence paid off. I'm copying my assistant. You get this meeting. So, it does matter, and you're not being a bug or anything like that. People want to, we want to hear from you, and we want to help young people, right? We want to help young people.
Sarita.
I think the most important, and I ditto everything Mazda just said, is for me is to have a specific ask. What do you want out of the relationship? Because I think it's worthwhile for both of us if you get something out of it and you don't feel like you're slated or anything like that. So if you call up or if you approach somebody and you want them to help you, I think you should have a specific ask. If that's mentorship, if that is a lunch meeting, if that is introduction with somebody, I think, you should really think about what your specific ask is before you approach that person. And it's really helpful for me because then I can tell, I don't have a lot of time, and sometimes, it's helpful so I know where we're going with this. Like, what do you want out of this? What do you need me to do? And I'm always there to help and always there to give you as much advice and help that I can give you, but if I know what you really want or what you want out of the relationship, then it's easier for me to do that.
Thanks, Sarita. Christine.
I would say the same in terms of knowing what you want. I think one of the things that I look at is the energy behind the individual, how interested they are in that given thing that they're saying they want to do, and maybe what thought they've put into it, because then it gives me an idea of how much energy I need to put into it if I'm going to help them or support them in achieving whatever their goal is. So, if someone's kind of bored about their field and I ask one or two questions and they just seem kind of lackadaisical about it, and then they want me to help them around it, I find it difficult to be energized with it. So a lot of the time I look at not just what they're saying, but their body language around that thing that they're looking for. Because a lot of the time it gives me, again, a feel for how eager they might be in order to be able to do that. But I do agree that persistence is important. When I have folk who ping me multiple times, I'm not saying you have to ping me many times, but if you ping me many times and, like I reached out to you, I haven't heard back, and again, there's a specific ask and it might have just gotten lost, in all of it, and maybe even clarify it and not make the email 2 pages long. It's okay to be, 4 very clear bullets so that it's very clear to me and I don't have to try and figure you out in my email. Then that's great, because then I know it's clear, it smacks me in the face. It's not rude to just write 1, 2, 3, but writing your whole history makes it difficult because then I have to spend 5 minutes trying to find the one sentence that's the most important to you. So if you can really make it clear in the beginning, put some energy and thought behind it, and then you can give me the history after that. That's great.
So I think that this is a loaded question because there's 2 separate things that we're talking about, and one of those is, how do you approach someone that you have an ask for? And there is proper etiquette and you should be persistent, and I might ignore it the first few times because I've got other things going on and I appreciate the persistence and all that. But at the same time, if we're talking about networking or building relationships with potential mentors, I don't think I've ever done that with somebody that I haven't actually had chemistry with or taken the time to build a relationship with or ask them about things outside of their work. And so I would say the same thing to others looking for that, which is we're people, we're human beings, we have lives, we have interests, and we're not just what it says on our bio and our career. And you know, if you want a deeper relationship beyond I have this specific ask, then it's okay to ask personal questions or share personal things or be a real person. I appreciate that, at least.
Thanks. Vana?
A personal overture is nice, not an email. So when students ask for something, I will ask them to meet with me, even if it's a letter of recommendation. So that's important and that's memorable. Number two, if I will offer more of my time, it will often be based on what the project is. So, for example, we had some students who wanted to do a significant project on the topic of human trafficking, and it involved a lot of work and a lot of my time and resources and things like that. So if it has to do with something that I think will elevate thought, you know, or make an impact to students, to staff, to the university community, then I'm going to put more of my time in it. So it's totally subjective. Sorry, that's the truth.
Well, I mean, I do think it's important, though, you know, that one size doesn't fit all. And, you know, a lot of the advice that you gave, when you apply it within particular circumstances, you're going to flex to that. And that goes back to the relationships piece and the idea that, you know, we might be taking better care of our devices than we are of ourselves, as Ariana Huffington said, but, you know, those interactions are happening person to person, and that's, you know, the important thing to remember. I'm hoping some of you have some questions, and do they have to go to the microphones, Craig? I think we can hear. Please.
First, I want to thank the World Council for this. I don't think I've ever attended a session on women business owners where the majority of the presenters were women of color. This is great. And I also want to thank Ms. Moore for what she said, because I can recall when I was in law school, one of my white male classmates said, when we graduate, you're automatically going to be able to go to a firm because you're black. It didn't work out that way, and as I pointed out to him, 97% of the partners, not just partners, the associates in law firms at that time were people like him, white males. So, I would like to ask the panel, what can we do as women to be supportive of one another? Because sometimes we are not, I'll just say, we are not as supportive as we should be to one another.
Can I take this first?
Absolutely.
So if I can be candid, the project of establishing the Women's Center at St. Joe's, it was frustrating for a couple of reasons. One of them, the main one, was I happened to be working with some pretty powerful women, friends of the school, friends of the university, who I was looking up to, and I guess I started to build my own expectation that this would evolve into a mentoring kind of relationship and something that would be deep and heavy and personal, and we would have tea and they would learn about my life, and it didn't happen that way, and it actually it was troubling because we actually feuded and you know, it became tense, and in the end there was kind of an odd fallout. So I was very disappointed, and so to answer your question, I mean, we still need to support each other and still need to care for one another. And I had an assumption that because they were women that they would automatically support me and care, but that clearly wasn't the case. My boss is a man, and he's extraordinary, and I hear that a lot, that male bosses tend to be cooler to their women. I don't know. You can, correct me. I don't know, but we're not doing a good job at all. And Sheryl Sandberg in her book, she talked about that in Lean In, that she herself didn't answer women's questions. Hands were raised by 3 women. I forget the event, but she, of all people, chose the male participants who had questions. And so we are taking it for granted, and we still have a lot of work to do.
I would say that a way to do it is to have the intention of wanting to do it. Because if you don't have an intention of wanting to make a change, then it's kind of tricky to prioritize it in your scheme of things, right? And so for myself and actually at the Chamber, we intentionally seek to have both men and women who work with us, who intern with us. We always look for promising young women who are looking to enter the world of trade and investment, and we have a strong mentoring process for that. In addition to that, we have a round table of women business owners who we share with, and we're willing to, let me say, be candid with in terms of our strengths and our weaknesses. Because we found that initially when we started off with the Women's Roundtable, a lot of women wanted to say everything was going great. They didn't necessarily want to share their vulnerabilities. And so giving ourselves permission to share our vulnerabilities and then work through that, we found to be extremely helpful. And we actually picked that from something that was going on in Africa with women empowerment groups, because they tended to be doing that pretty well, but we were not doing it here. Yet those ideas were generated here in the US and then exported out, and then we're not using it here. So we kind of imported it back. But what we found was that really to intentionally want to be supportive of women businesses, women career professionals is great. For a long time, I consulted in higher education, and our VP was a woman, and she, to kind of go with what you're saying, Vanna, she was very, very intentional about supporting the women in her team. And, when they were seeking promotions, on our weekly meetings, she'd always say, who's looking for a promotion? I love working with you, but if you have an opportunity, I will support you. And that actually allowed a lot of the women on the team to continue to grow within the company or even to go on to other companies. So, her sense of self-worth was not defined by her power over these people, but really in enabling these women to maximize their potential. So I think, again, asking ourselves, how did we get to where we are? Did we have folk who paid forward to help us get to where we are, and how can we pay forward in supporting not just women, but I'd say men too, because I think there are a lot of men who can benefit from mentoring. We make an assumption that the guys have it together, but that may not always be the case.
And I think this is going to be our last question in terms of getting out on time, but please. Thank you. Mazda.
I think I'm going to go back and then come forward. I think that one of the things that as we were talking about kind of where we are, one thing that was kind of going through my mind was around the fact that those of us that are kind of in this age range and above, where I am and above, mid-30s and up, have already experienced kind of what happens in the workplace and the world. And so I think that although there are some things that we could change there, I think that it's very important that the conversation starts with the millennials and the ones that are coming in now, and that they understand and embody and receive the idea that it's not about competition, but it's more about completion. And I say all the time, we're not competing with one another. We need to be completing one another and seeing, what we can do to help each other out. I think that's really important, because if we think that way coming into it, and as you all rise to power, you will be changing and affecting the change, in these corporations and these organizations now. You won't be looking at it as there's a piece of the pie that there is, and that's, I think, what really happens, and there's research behind it, that women feel like there is a set amount that that is there to go around, and women are only going to get but so much. So you are now my enemy because you're infringing on my piece of the pie, possibly. It should really be, my piece. So I say all of that to say that first, that's what we have to begin to start thinking of, but then from your perspective, I feel that those, men that are in these positions make, almost as you were saying, Christine, make deliberate effort to make it clear that you are going to have opportunities for women, and that you recognize the struggle, and that you are looking for opportunities to help women succeed and, and to get further in their careers. And I think that as women see, not only from their own mental capacity, they're going to help one another, but they see you doing things and saying that, whether it's, I want to make sure that you can go to this women's conference, I want to make sure that I'm going to pay for professional development, whether it's, affinity groups. I mean, there's a ton of ways in organizations to say you support those things, and then show up to those things, right? So there's a women's whatever, and it's all women. I love when there is the token man that's like, because I'm here for women. Love it. So, I mean, it says a lot about what, about you caring about women. And the higher up in the organization that man is, it speaks to what's important to him in terms of, what he's infusing in the organization. So.
Thanks. Sarita, did you?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Another important aspect of that is that in corporate America, the reality of the situation is a lot of mothers are working. And unless you have in your companies opportunities for mothers to still work and raise their families, it's not going to be equal. So I think a really important thing going forward is to recognize that there are women out there that want to raise their families, that are the head of their household, so to speak, and in order for them to do that and be successful at your company, there's going to be a give and take, and you're able to recognize that and make that happen. So,
Thank you, Sarita.
Let me conclude this evening with another round of thank yous to Peggy, to our panelists, to Ariana Huffington, to St. Joseph's University, and all of you for being with us. We hope that you go on to thrive in your own way, or at least find the way to the nap room. We're concluded.